Welcome everyone to this week's reproducibility of the University of Basel. We have the pleasure to have with us Ludo Waltman. Ludo is scientific director and professor of quantitative science studies at the Center for Science and Technologies Studies at Leiden University. He's co-chair of the Research Institute as well, and an open ambassador of the Leiden University and president of ASAP Bio, an organization that promotes open and innovative communications in life science. So the floor is yours, Ludo. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Xeni, for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be in your meeting. Yeah, what I hope to do today with all of you is to have some discussion about essentially the way we do scientific publishing and the way scientific publishing could be innovated. So I will focus on a particular type of innovation that I personally believe is extremely interesting, and that's the so-called publish-review-curate model. So I will say a few things in general about that model and why I think it is interesting, why I think it's actually potentially part of the solution to a number of quite deep problems that we are facing in the scientific publishing system. I also will say something about what is happening right now in my own research field. So I am doing research in the field of meta-research. So I'm studying the research system, which is a research field in itself. And I will in particular focus on that field and on developments in publishing in this meta-research community. And perhaps what I would like to start with is kind of just ask those of you who are here in this meeting, who actually in this meeting, who considers themselves to be in some way a meta-researcher. Is there anyone in this meeting who has themselves an interest in studying the research system, in doing meta-research? And if so, perhaps you can raise your hand or you can just briefly indicate it. Okay, I see a few hands. Martin, Julia, Michelle, Alex, great. Good. Okay, that's nice to see. I hope that the things I'm going to present will, in particular for those of you who consider themselves to be meta-researchers, will be of special relevance. I will go to my slides. Yeah, I'm going to talk about innovation in scholarly communication, in particular publish-review-curate model, and I will focus on part of the discussion, part of my talk on the thing that's at the bottom right here on this slide, the MetaROR initiative, Meta Research Open Review, which is a new thing, and I will tell you more about that in a minute. This, what you see here, is something that recently I wrote together with colleagues in ASAP Bio, which was already briefly mentioned in the introduction, an organization in the life sciences working on innovating scholarly communication, scholarly publishing. And in ASAP Bio, we wrote a brief document explaining the publish-review-curate model, an alternative way of doing scientific publishing and peer review. There's a lot of discussion about this. In recent years, this has really become quite a significant topic, at least in certain communities. But at the same time, we also felt like, perhaps actually people don't necessarily share the same idea of what this term really means, this publish-review-curate. So let's write it down. Let's write down at least the way we understand it. So in this thing, it's actually a preprint. What you can see is an attempt to define publish-review-curate. Publish-review-curate is a model of scientific communication that breaks the process of publishing down into 3 distinct parts. So first the publish stage, then the review stage, and then the curate stage. Before I go in more detail, I hope you notice what is happening here. Publish is at the start. Publish is the first thing that precedes other stages in the process. In particular, publishing precedes peer review. So that is exactly the opposite thing from what traditional journals do. Traditional journals, of course, I don't need to explain that. They first do peer review of your article, and based on the outcome of that, they will decide to accept your article for publication or to reject it. And in the publish-review-curate model, we turn it around. It starts with publishing. You first make the article publicly available. And then there is peer review. So that's a fundamental difference. And I personally believe changing the order has many, many benefits. Okay, so in the published state, a researcher makes the research artifact, we say here, but in practice, in most cases, it will be an article. But in principle, it could be other things like data sets, for instance. So in the published state, the research artifact is made public by a researcher. In the case of a research article, one way in which you can do that is by publishing it on a preprint server. So that is the first step. Your article is available online somewhere in a well-organized way, in a well-structured way. So a preprint server, for instance, offers a DOI for your article, so a persistent identifier. You can attach a license to it. There's metadata that is made available. So that is kind of a proper way of doing publishing. The second stage is the peer review stage. And this is a bit like what journals do traditionally. So there's reviewers, and these reviewers evaluate the research artifact, the article, they provide feedback. But in the publish-review-curate model, peer review is transparent. Peer review is open. So the review reports are published. They are published alongside the article. This could be with or without identities of the reviewers. That is always a bit controversial. Some people say reviewers should not be asked to reveal their identity because there are important reasons why at least certain reviewers may feel uneasy about revealing their identity, disclosing who they are. For instance, junior researchers might feel uneasy. There's power imbalances in the research system, so we shouldn't do that. Other people believe that we need full transparency, which also means disclosing identities. Well, the publish-review-curate model could be interpreted in both ways, with or without disclosing identities. But the model is clear about the idea that the content of the review reports should be made public. So the reports should be published and they should be linked to the published article. And then finally, in the publish-review-curate model, there is a curate stage. And in the curate stage, there's an editor who looks at the outcomes of the peer review process and then provides an overall kind of editorial assessment and overall evaluation of the research artifact. So that's one way of doing curation. Curation in many cases also involves compiling research artifacts into collections. So kind of structuring the items in such a way that they are easy to access, easy to, for instance, find, easy to discover for those who might be interested in consuming these research artifacts. So readers of your article, for instance. Yeah, so that final stage, the curate stage, is about making things easy to consume. So also the evaluation, so the kind of summary judgments, the evaluation of an article in this curate stage, they at least partly serve that particular purpose, helping readers to decide what to read and what to ignore, in essence. And that is, of course, quite similar to what journals also do. Many of us, we use journals, journal brands. We use them as a kind of a thing, a heuristic that enables us to filter the literature and to decide what to read and what to ignore. And this curate stage in the publish-review-curate model is similar. Important thing, PRC, publish-review-curate, can be implemented. It is not always done, but it is at least a possibility. It can be implemented in a fully decentralized way. So you can have the publish, the review, and the curate stage being implemented by different platforms that operate independently from each other. So, for instance, publishing takes place on a preprint server, that's an option, or perhaps in an institutional repository. Peer review is something that is done by a peer review platform. So there are platforms like, for instance, the pre-review platform, where anyone can actually just choose to post a review of a particular preprint. And then curate is a stage that again could be organized, could be facilitated by a different type of platform. Think, for instance, of overlay journals that are kind of overlays on top of preprint servers and that decide to publish some of the articles, but not others. And publishing then essentially means something like endorsing, giving a stamp of approval to an article. So you can have PRC in a decentralized way, but it doesn't need to be like that. For instance, many of you may be familiar with the F1000 platform, F1000 Journal, but also, for instance, things like Welcome Open Research or Gates Open Research or Open Research Europe, all these platforms, it's kind of all the same model. They also offer PRC, but they offer it in a centralized way. So publish, review, and curate are all integrated in one platform. Okay, this is PRC. And then you may ask yourself, okay, why should we care about this? Why is this really interesting or important? I think there are a number of reasons. The traditional journal system is, first of all, extremely slow. The peer review process often takes a very long time, and articles get published only at the end of the process after the peer review has been completed, and only if the peer review led to a positive outcome. This is a very slow process. You probably all know that. I sometimes have, it happened recently, one of my PhD students, she submitted to a journal, it took a long time, and then in the end the article got very superficial peer review. She was really very emotional about the fact that she had been waiting eagerly to get feedback on that article that she had put so much effort into. She was so passionate about that article, and then she had to wait for a year or so to get just a few lines of superficial feedback. That's, of course, what sometimes happens in the journal peer review system, what is frustrating, disappointing for researchers, but also when you look at the system at large, it means that the way in which we disseminate scientific knowledge is extremely slow. Well, the idea, of course, is that we get something in exchange for that slowness. We get quality control, quality assurance. And in theory, that's indeed what we get from the peer review that journals offer. We know that in practice, it often is not really what the peer review provides. We know that a lot of peer review is superficial, idiosyncratic, perhaps biased. So it's not the system that in theory it should be. And we know that many peer-reviewed journals publish lots of articles that are not necessarily very robust. We can blame the journals for that, like, oh, why don't they do a better job in organizing peer review? Well, I was a journal editor. I was a journal editor for a long time, and when you are a journal editor, you see actually the problem that we have in the journal system. It's not possible to get all the reviewers that you need to organize proper peer review. These people are simply not available. Everyone is too busy, and reviewers feel they don't get proper credit for doing peer review. So why would they invest their limited time in doing all that peer review? So as an editor, as a journal editor, you are in an extremely complex position. You have these authors that have high expectations. They expect that you will offer within just a couple of weeks, perhaps 1 or 2 months, you offer high quality, rigorous peer review for their work with detailed peer review reports. You have these peer reviewers that are completely overburdened and that tell you each time you approach them, I don't have time to do yet another review. I already did a review for you last month. You cannot ask me again. That's the role that journal editors have. That's the impossible role that many journal editors find themselves in. This system, I would say, is actually about to collapse. It's a system that promises a lot, but it doesn't deliver on its promise. And there's not one single kind of actor in the system that we should blame for that, but collectively, together, we have set up a system that doesn't work anymore. PRC can be a solution for a number of reasons. First, we speed up, we accelerate the publication of the research because we don't wait until the peer review has been completed. Second, we do the peer review openly, which means that many more people can benefit from the peer review. Not only authors and editors, but also readers. Readers of the research can benefit from the peer review, which is a major improvement, I believe, in kind of making sure that peer review is really delivering value for the system at large. Also, by having more people that benefit from the peer review, it becomes much more interesting to be a peer reviewer. It becomes much more valuable actually to invest your time in doing that, especially if you also sign your reviews, because then you can get credit for all the effort that you invest into doing peer review. So that is an important, I believe, benefit of the publish-review-curate model. Also, what you don't have in this model, depending on perhaps a bit on how it is implemented, but you don't have this thing of articles that get reviewed by one journal, they get rejected, they get reviewed by another journal, again they are rejected, they're sent to a third journal, and again peer review needs to be organized. This is actually one of the reasons why there is so much pressure on the peer review system. It is because articles get peer reviewed multiple times by different journals. In the PRC, in the publish-review-curate model, there's no need for that. The article gets published first, then it gets peer reviewed. The peer reviews are publicly available, so everyone can make use of them. Anyone has access to the review reports. So that means that actually redoing peer review multiple times is not necessary. There's no need for that. If you have one single set of proper peer review reports, then that's enough. So that will also reduce the pressure on the system. So these are some of the reasons why I think publish-review-curate is interesting. And I'm not the only one, because this is the growth of publish-review-curate over the past 2 decades. And so these are a number of platforms that organize publish-review-curate in different ways. I won't go into the details, but they all kind of facilitate this publish-review-curate model. This is not comprehensive. There's more platforms, but this is at least a number of important platforms. And here you can see how they have grown over time. So you see the F1000 platforms, which you may know. You see also things like GMAR, journal in medical sciences that is based on the PRC model. You see Peer Community In, important platform which has different communities that all offer publish-review-curate. You see the Review Commons initiative in the life sciences, SciPost, which is in particular active in physics. There's eLife in the life sciences again, and there's Copernicus. Copernicus is very active in the earth sciences, and they have a number of journals that all operate according to this publish-review-curate model. So publish-review-curate has grown a lot over the past decade. And you see in particular in recent years that it has also grown in new communities. So initially it was very active mainly in the earth sciences, in the field in which Copernicus is active, but in recent years other fields have started to adopt the model, in particular also in the life sciences. So this shows, I think, that publish-review-curate is something that is perceived to be increasingly interesting, increasingly relevant for researchers. And perhaps also more and more researchers recognize that the journal model in the way we know it traditionally is not really working anymore. It's too slow, it's too much under pressure, the peer review doesn't deliver what it promises. So there is a need to shift to alternative models, or at least to experiment with alternative models. Okay, this is at the moment all going on. What I'm now going to show you is a concrete experiment. And this is an experiment that I'm involved in myself. And this also is the link to the field of meta-research. So I am a meta-researcher. Some of you have just self-identified as meta-researchers, which is great. Meta-research, I just define it as anyone who is doing research that is about the research system itself. Some of these people do this kind of as their primary interest, their primary research area. For instance, that applies to me. I am doing full-time meta-research. But there are also many people who actually are working in other research fields and who do meta-research as a kind of a side thing, which is perfectly fine, which is also a great way of doing meta-research. Meta-ROR is the initiative that I'm going to present. Meta-ROR means Meta-Research Open Review. This is a new publish-review-curate platform for the field of meta-research. So anyone who does meta-research, either as a kind of a full-time occupation or as a side thing, doesn't matter. Anyone who does meta-research might be interested actually in making use of the Meta-ROR platform, because this platform offers publish-review-curate for research in this field of meta-research. Making publishing and peer review faster, more efficient, and more rewarding. That's kind of what we are trying to do. So we launched the platform just 1 week ago. It's a very recent development. 1 week ago, the platform was launched, metador.org. So here you see the website. It's a new initiative, so it's still very small. At the moment, there are 4 articles on the platform, 4 articles that have been peer-reviewed in this new way. So these articles were first published on the preprint server. They were then peer-reviewed openly. The reviews are on the platform, and then also we published what we call an editorial assessment. So that is the curate part of publish-review-curate. So I'm now going to tell you more about, first of all, why we did this, and then how we do it. So why? In the field of meta-research, I think, like in many other fields, we have at least 3 key challenges, and then we have some things that are not the primary motivation for meta, but that are also important. So the pressure on the peer review system is a huge challenge, and this is definitely not specific to meta-research fields, but I was an editor of a journal in this field, so I experienced it myself. Everyone has high expectations. Everyone expects the journals do this really rigorous peer review, but in practice, it's almost impossible to fulfill that promise. There's too much pressure on this peer review system. There's not enough capacity. There's also a lack of openness in research practices. So think, for instance, about things like data sharing and all of these things. That's still not has not been fully embraced by the meta research community. But also think about the way we actually do quality assessment of our own work, so the way we do peer review. And there also, when you look at the journals in the field, most of them don't practice any openness. Most peer review is closed. There's also limited accessibility of the literature, so many articles are still appearing behind paywalls in hybrid journals, for instance, and these articles then in the end are not open access. But also for those colleagues who do actually want to make their research open access, it's not always easy. Journals charge APCs, these APCs might not be affordable. So there is a challenge in terms of the accessibility of the literature. On top of that, the field of meta research, the field that meta is serving, is quite siloed. So it is perhaps, you could argue, not really a field. It's all kinds of communities that do meta research, but they are kind of operating independently from each other. And there is a feeling that we have, so we as me, together with a number of colleagues, a feeling that we need a platform that is trying to bring these communities closer together. And meta also has that ambition. And finally, what we feel is that with the traditional journals in the field, what we have is a problem of lack of community ownership. So the journals are mostly owned by commercial publishers. And that means that we as a scientific community, we have only limited influence on how the journals operate. And for Meta-ROR, that is different. Meta-ROR is for the community, but also by the community. The community is in charge here. Okay, how does Meta-ROR operate? I'm going to explain to you the publish-review-curate model in the way Meta-ROR implements it. So there are different ways of doing publish-review-curate, but this is the Meta-ROR flavor of PRV. Articles, first of all, get published on a preprint server or in a repository. So these are some examples. MetaArchive, for instance, is a preprint server that is dedicated to meta research. So you can use that one, but you can also use some of these other preprint servers that you see over here. We don't have preferences. So Meta-ROR is kind of agnostic. It doesn't have an opinion about which preprint server you should be using. And actually, there is quite different traditions within the meta research field. Some people are very much kind of used to working with archive, others like bioRxiv, some like the OSF preprint servers, like perhaps PsyArchive. And we just say, do whatever you want. We don't care. It's up to you to decide. But then, after your article was published on a preprint server, then you can submit it to Meta-ROR. And submitting, it doesn't mean like traditionally with the journal, it doesn't mean that you submit a Word document. It means that you submit a link to the preprint. It's just a link. It's just kind of the DOI of the preprint. And that is what you submit to Meta-ROR. And Meta-ROR then organizes peer review. And these peer reviews are published. We publish them on the Meta-ROR platform. They also become citable objects, so they get a DOI, just like the article has a DOI on the preprint server. The review reports also get a DOI. So we recognize the preprint reports as scholarly outputs in their own right. You can, for instance, cite them in other scholarly outputs, in other articles. You can include them in your CV. That's the philosophy of Meta-ROR. Peer review actually should be seen as a scholarly conversation between researchers, authors of articles, reviewers of articles. They engage in a scholarly conversation, and all the elements in that conversation, the article, the review reports, author responses, they are all made openly available with a DOI. They are all citable. People can include them in their CVs. That's the philosophy that we have. And also the review reports are linked to the preprints. The editors of Meta-ROR, I'm one of them. I'm one of the editors-in-chief of the platform. The editors then publish an editorial assessment based on the review reports. Editorial assessments, I already mentioned it, they are short summaries of the strengths and weaknesses of an article. Not lengthy things, because these things need to be easy to consume by authors. And we know authors at the moment, they use very crude proxies, like the name of a journal, the brand of a journal, perhaps things like impact factors. Crude proxies, that's at the moment what authors often use to decide what to read, what to ignore. And we hope to offer an alternative for that. And these editorial assessments are intended to be that alternative, but we think that will only work if the editorial assessments are really concise. They should be easy to consume. It should take you just just a very little bit of time, no more than, let's say, 10, 20 seconds to see like, oh yeah, this is rigorous research. This is something I can trust. Oh, this is a bit shaky. Probably I should not pay too much attention to this, or at least I should be cautious with the interpretation of this research. Okay, that's the editorial assessments, also published openly, like the review reports. And then the idea is that readers will benefit from these editorial assessments. So readers will read the article along with the editorial assessment and the review reports. At the same time, authors can use the editorial assessments and the review reports to improve their article, to revise it, just like in a traditional journal system. But, and that's where it is different, there's no expectation that authors always do this. If authors feel that the comments of the reviewers or of the editors don't make sense, if authors disagree, they can just ignore them. They can just post a response on the platform and they can say, thank you for all this feedback. We appreciate the effort you made to review our articles. However, we respectfully disagree with some of your comments. We have a different take on these issues. We prefer to just leave things the way they are. That is fine. There is no pressure on authors to do all the things that reviewers ask them to do. And that's different from journals, where you always have that feeling as an author, you probably all know it. You have this feeling like, oh yeah, I need to now do this because otherwise my article will not get published. In the case of Meteor, the article is already published, so there is no pressure in that sense. Does this mean that anything goes? No, not at all, because readers have access to the reviews, to the editorial assessments, and to the responses of authors. So if you, as an author, don't have a convincing argument a convincing argument for, let's say, ignoring certain feedback that you got, for disregarding that feedback, then readers might actually choose to not to take seriously your work. So readers may say like, okay, this author just ignored some very valid points of criticism on their article. I'm not going to read this article. I don't trust this. All of this, the article itself, but also the reviews and editorial assessments, all of this can then be indexed in literature databases so that it's easy to find, so that it can also be used, for instance, when you create CVs in automated ways, when you do citation counts. And also, some authors may still say, I want ultimately my article to appear in a journal. And that's fine. You can publish still in a journal. Meteor is actually partnering with journals. So we partner with journals, and these journals, what they say is we will reuse the review reports that Meteor provides. So when you submit your article to our journal, and the article has already gone through the whole peer review process of Meteor, then we don't organize new peer review process from scratch, but we just reuse the review reports that Meteor has provided, and we can therefore immediately make an editorial decision. We can decide to accept your article for publication or to reject it. But this can be a matter of a few days rather than many months. That's a possibility. At the same time, we also say some authors might just feel like there's no need anymore to publish in a journal. Meteor is enough. Meteor offers peer review, Meteor offers an editorial assessment. That's all I need. That's, for instance, my personal view on this. So I personally plan to just have my articles peer reviewed by Meteor, but not to then also publish them in a journal. But I also, at the same time, I understand that some colleagues, some other meta researchers might have different preferences. Okay, an example, concrete example. This paper by Simon Porter and Daniel Hook was published on a preprint server earlier this year. It was then submitted to Meteor. Meteor organized peer review. Here you see one of the reviewers. This reviewer signed his report. And then an editorial assessment was written by me. I was the editor that handled this paper. I wrote an editorial assessment informed by the reports of the reviewers. And as you can see, it's just one paragraph. And that's the final thing. One paragraph statement highlighting strengths, but also weaknesses of the article. The authors may now revise the article, and then we will probably organize another round of peer review. The authors might also say, we disagree with some of these criticism that we got, we don't agree with it, we are not going to make changes. So we will see what is going to happen. But this is now intended to be much more like a conversation between researchers in the same field with similar types of knowledge, rather than the traditional model, where as an author, you just, in a kind of almost like a slave, you need to just do what the editor or the reviewers, what they ask you to do. And that's not what we want on the Meteor platform. This is the team behind the platform. This is the team that set up the platform. We have colleagues from the research from Research Institute and colleagues from AMOS, the Association for Interdisciplinary Meta-Science and Open Science. This is the team. The team will probably grow over time. We would like to make the team bigger and broader and more diverse, but that will take some time. And these are the journals that we partner with. So it is Collabora, Quantitative Science Studies, Science as Culture, and Scientometrics. And we expect that in the near future, more and more journals will sign up to partnering with Meteor. We have infrastructure providers that have helped us to set this up. For instance, eLife, a journal in the life science that also uses publish-review-curate. We have the COCO infrastructure, the Cotani system. So that's also important to mention that these infrastructure providers, they supported us. And that's basically what we did. I'm just going to end by mentioning this discussion that is ongoing at the moment. So what you see is for all these new initiatives like Meteor, like eLife, but also other publish-review-curate initiatives, there's a question about indexing in databases. In principle, it is possible. All these things, all these new items that we have, review reports, editorial assessments, they can get DOIs. When you have a DOI, you can be indexed in databases. But it's not always happening. And in particular, there's one database, an important one, Web of Science, important in the sense that in some parts of the world, many decisions are made based on what is indexed in this database. And this database actually has a quite traditional perspective on what to index. And they, for instance, have now said, like, well, actually, these articles that are peer-reviewed by eLife, we are probably not going to index them. And there's a lot of discussion now ongoing about this. I won't go into the details, but it shows that we are in a kind of a complex time at the moment. There's all this innovation in scholarly publishing, and then there are databases, including some important databases that are not actually, I would say, properly supporting this innovation, and they are kind of lagging behind in terms of the way they kind of think about scholarly publishing and the way they choose to index certain types of articles or not to index them. So that's something to keep in mind. Thank you for your attention, and this is also an invitation to all of you to consider submitting to the Meteor platform. So I look forward to receiving your submissions.